Fellow tennis nerds, I hope all is well. I'm here with a familiar guest, Nikola from Intuitive Tennis, one of my favorite tennis coaches out there. Does a great job, has interesting videos every week to watch, so check out his channel and his courses. But today we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about all things tennis news, Rafa and the rackets and whatnot. So stick around. But first of all, how are you, Nikola?
I'm doing good, Jonas. Thank you for having me on. The nice thing about tennis is that there's always something happening as far as professional tennis is concerned. So there's always stuff to talk about,
100%, yeah.
Yeah.
Like this week and the last maybe couple of weeks has been all Rafa, right? Rafa, pretty much. That's been the thing. I know you're a huge Rafa fan, as am I.
I am.
So how has your feeling been around seeing him again, like playing?
It's been somewhat sad, I'll be honest. Especially the match that he lost, it was sad. And it was such a touching ceremony on the court with those banners that they put down that said, I think it said Gracias Rafa or something like that.
Yeah.
For the 5 titles that he won. So it's kind of sad. You see his family crying, and as a huge fan, to think that this is it, we're not going to see him again in Madrid, is sad. But I'm also very grateful to have watched the 4 matches that he played in Madrid. It's so fun, even though he's not the same player as he used to be. When he pulls out that lawnmower, I'm like lawnmowering with him, you know what I mean, in the living room. I love it. I just love watching him play. He's my all-time favorite player. I'm super happy that I'm watching him again, but I'm also a little bit sad because, it's kind of hard to figure out what he wants to do because he's not 100% committed to the retirement. He said, it's confusing because he said, this is my last time in Madrid, but then he says, I don't know when I'm going to retire. Then he committed to the Labor Cup. So I do think that there's a small chance that he's going to keep going, maybe even next year. And that's my wish. But of course, only if his body allows him to play, because I don't want him to be in pain. The worst match I've ever seen from Nadal was Wimbledon quarterfinals against Fritz, where his family was begging him to stop. I think he had tore an ab muscle or broke a rib or something like that. It was something terrible. And he was in so much pain, and he continued to play that match, won that match, but everybody in his box was begging him to stop. So that I didn't like seeing. He did retire, or not, he didn't even step on the court against Kyrgios in the semis, but that's something I don't want to see. I hate to watch him when he's hurt. So I'd rather have him retire and not try to play injured. I only want to see him continue to play if he's fit to play, Yeah.
Same. I don't like seeing players Fed and Rafa are my guys, kind of like it's kind of perfect for when I came back into tennis, and to see both of them, like either of them, really hurt when they're playing was same with Federer when he came back. You could see that he's not moving as he used to do. Rafa is still fighting, still playing pretty well, but it's not like Rafa of even 5 years ago, right? This is different Rafa. So you can see that the body limitations are there. He's still fighting, still playing well. He's still tricky because he's a very smart player. The Deminar match where he had to start looping balls, start playing a little bit differently because Deminar is never going to stop running. So he needs to find a way, and he finds a way. He's still that smart, still that good. So it's just the body that's hurting a bit.
I think it's definitely some physical limitations. You can see that when he's moving to the backhand side.
Yeah.
He's always kind of stretched on the backhand side, and he used to defend a lot better. And also when he runs around the backhand hitting forehands, it just looks a tad slower. And also I feel like that his shots sometimes don't have a lot of that same power that they used to. But I do think this is also somewhat connected to confidence because he barely played any tennis. So even if he was 100% top fit and maybe 5 years younger, I'd still think that he would be struggling right now just because he hasn't played any matches. And Rafa is a confidence player that needs a lot of matches. Of course, sometimes he can just be out for a while and come right back and start doing really well. But generally speaking, he's more of a confidence player, and he needs a lot of matches and a lot of match wins to start playing his best tennis. So even in top form, top physical health, I still think that he'd be struggling right now, and I don't really see how he would beat someone like Sinner or Alcaraz, even on clay.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. You see that he is a little bit rusty. That's part of it, but it's also some kind of injury that holds him back a bit. If you've seen a lot of Rafa, but it's also the obvious rust. Like he always needed matches, and he has not played in so long. And he's probably gonna be in decent shape for the French Open. I have a feeling, right? He's gonna be able to play. I don't think he's gonna win the tournament, but I think he's gonna be decent, you know. But then running, like you say, into Novak, Sinner, or Alcaraz, these types of guys is too much now. I think that's just too difficult.
I think it's too much, but I do think that Madrid has always been a tough one for him. You know, he did lose a lot of matches there, and he only won that tournament 4 times, I believe, because one of the titles in Madrid was indoors.
Yep.
So the one that really hurt for me was Monte Carlo, because that would have been a good one for him to play. The conditions suit him there. And if he could have gotten a few matches there, I think he would have done better in Barcelona. So I think now that he's played Barcelona, he's played Madrid, and won, I think, a total of 4 matches, right? Altogether, 4 matches. I think he's going to, depending on the draw, of course, but I think he's going to do well in Rome, because he's an absolute beast in those conditions in Rome, because I think the ball bounces a little bit higher.
Yeah.
And so
slower. Far slower though. Yeah.
You think it's slower? I thought Rome was always considered faster.
No, not that the way. I mean, I've been there a few times. I think it's okay. The times I'm thinking in my head is probably the kind of rainy ones, because they used to have some rain there in Rome during May, right? So, but still, I feel like it's a little bit slower. I feel like the Madrid one was
slower than Madrid. Slower than Madrid.
Yeah, I would say, yeah.
I agree.
Madrid is pretty fast,
I agree because of the altitude, but generally, I think Rome was always considered one of the faster clay courts. And remember, I think Medvedev won last year, didn't he?
I think so, yeah.
And also, I think Sampras won one year.
That's even crazier. Okay.
Yeah. So I think it's like, and I remember hearing this, that it's a very hard court. And so it benefits the power game, of course. And it also benefits Nadal, because a hard clay court will make the ball bounce higher and makes the topspin obviously more effective. So it's going to be interesting to see what he does in Rome. The draw can be brutal for him. I mean, he can go against one of these top guys very early, and that might be a tough hurdle to overcome. But if he gets a decent draw, I think he can do some pretty good damage there. So let's see what happens.
Yeah, and then that's positive for the French Open. Like, it's difficult with him now because you're in two minds, because he's partly says, like, it's the last time I play this, it's the last time I do this, it's the last time I do this. And then he talks about, like, he wants his son to see more of him, you know, when he's more understanding what's going on. Like, the kid is obviously very young still. So he would ideally want to play, like, 1 more year at least. So that's going to be one in the back of his mind, that he would want to if his body holds up, and everybody wants to. I mean, we all want to see Rafa, you know, but you don't want to see Rafa on 60%. That's not fun. Then I'd rather have the memory of Rafa when he's like vamosing all the way and winning 6-love, 6-2, right? So that's the tricky part. But he's giving a little bit of mixed signals, because I think, you know, in his heart, he so strongly wants to compete. And he wants to play Olympics with Alcaraz in the doubles. That would be cool. And I thought when they announced this Laver Cup thing, I thought it would be like, okay, this is the retirement party, similar to Rogers. And maybe Roger comes out and they play doubles together for the last time, which would have been like goosebumps, you know, if they pull that off. If they don't tell anyone and Roger just comes out and plays doubles, that would be nuts, you know.
That would be amazing. But I want to mention one thing that I finally understand, I think, because I was very confused with Rafa, and I didn't call him out, but in one of my Monday morning rants, I said that he should stop putting pictures of him, videos of himself on Instagram playing tennis a day after pulling out of a tournament. I thought that's not a good look, and it makes people wonder, why is he practicing if he's supposedly injured, right? But now I'm starting to understand what's been going on, because I'm listening very carefully to Rafa, what he's saying. And it turns out that he was losing to a ton of the kids at his academy since he came back and started training. So Rafa said that if he doesn't feel like he can be competitive at these tournaments, that he's not going to play. So I think there is probably physical issues, but I think the issues are more mental, because I think throughout this stretch, of course, he got hurt in Australia, no doubt about it. But when he tried to come back after that and he pulled out of all those events, I think that he was able to play, but he didn't believe that he was good enough to play and competitive enough to play. And he said the same thing about the French Open. He explained it. He said that is such an important tournament for me. It's the most important tournament of my tennis career. And I'm not going to play there if I don't think that I can be competitive. Now, he did say not necessarily competitive to win the whole thing, but just competitive enough to give himself chances to win matches. So this just goes to show you how difficult tennis is from a mental standpoint, where if you don't have the belief that you can play, and it's probably stemming from the fact that he was losing to kids at his academy, which is hard to believe, but I believe it. This is one thing about tennis that's not often talked about. It's the mental challenges that these players are facing week in and week out, and it's really tough.
Yeah, Rafa is an icon, and we want to play as far as possible. I think like he got some criticism also of like the social media team, like you mentioned, that he was posting these videos. A lot of people got pissed off because it's like that's the worst thing you can do, and say, hey, well, I'm not playing, and then you post a video, oh, look how hard I'm training, right? I think there was some out of sync social media team there that
Yes.
maybe didn't work so well, but you can see it in the way he practices and how badly he wants to play, right? Like I think comparing to Roger, like if you see Roger now and how happy he is and he's like traveling around wearing sunglasses and being a part of movies and playing with Coldplay, whatever, he's doing just fun stuff. Mm-hmm. He seems to love life, right? He's such as I love life. Rafa is more like, I love tennis, maybe a little bit of golf, of course, and fishing, but tennis is to die for, right? So I think for him, it's even tougher to even think of retirement than for Roger, I would say. I think even so, even if Roger, of course, loves tennis as well, but for Rafa, it's a tough decision to make.
I think he really loves it. He loves being on the court and competing. And you can see that in the last 20 years that we've been watching him, how even when he's absolutely getting destroyed, and he's gotten destroyed many times. I just saw somebody put up a draw of Nalbandian winning Madrid when it was still indoors, where he beat Berdych. And I might get a couple of guys wrong, but I think he beat Berdych, Del Potro, Nadal, Djokovic, Federer. I 100% know that the sequence was Nadal, 2-1 in the quarters, then Djokovic and Federer. But anyway, he got destroyed by Nalbandian 2-1 in that match. I remember one year he got completely destroyed in the US Open semis by Del Potro. And he, of course, got destroyed many times by Djokovic. But in those matches where he's playing his absolute worst and the opponent is playing out of his mind, you can still see that Rafa is trying. He's fighting, even down like 5-1, 5-love. He's still giving his best. And I think that's one of the greatest attributes of Nadal, and one of the greatest things to try to emulate is his willingness to compete no matter what the circumstances are. I think he is probably the greatest of all time at that particular thing. I will say, though, that when we talk about the mental game overall, him and Novak are probably at the top. But if we compare those two against each other mentally, I'll give Novak a slight edge. But as far as fighting and having a good attitude out there on the court, no matter what the circumstances, I feel like Nadal is the best in history. I've never seen him like give up. And see, a lot of people kind of equate like giving up with tanking, but it's very subtle, because somebody can just outright tank and not try and, lose the set, whatever, 6-0 or 6-1 and kind of just tank. But then there's also where players are giving up, but they continue to play. And it's a little bit tougher to see. But I've seen it on Djokovic, for example, many times where, he's still playing, but you can see that he's out of the match and there's no chance that he's going to come back. I've never seen that on Nadal. There's not one match that I've seen with Nadal where the body language was such where he was checked out of the match. He always tries until the very last point. And Yeah, it's something truly amazing.
I think the ultimate role model, because I think so many players on club level or any level really, like futures, club, what do you want? They check out mentally, right? We all do that and have done
Yep.
that. But like you said, he never does it, and you've seen some crazy comebacks. Like even when he was down like 5-1 to Medvedev in some ATP finals, that I
Right.
don't. That was not many years ago. He came back, won that from nowhere, like
Right.
no business doing that. Same against Medvedev also in that final in Australian Open, right? So he's done these matches where everybody in the whole arena, including his own family, are like, okay, he's done, he's gonna lose, fair enough, you know. And he's playing every point with the same, like, okay, hope. He just takes 1 point, and that mindset of 1 point, it sounds so basic, but it's so difficult mentally to do that in tennis, because you have always the
Yeah.
score in the back of your head. You always look at the opponent who is going in a positive, trend, and then you have to think point, point, point. But he does it. He's the best at doing that by
It's
far, I would say.
it's easier said than done. Maybe this has to come from within, because what happens in those scenarios is that your opponent is on absolute fire, and the chances of him or her beating you is like 99.99%, and you just kind of mentally give in. You're like, he's just too good,
Yeah.
and you're still playing, and you're kind of trying, but you don't really have the belief that you're going to win, and therefore the fighting spirit is not there. Where Nadal, I truly believe that it doesn't matter what the score is. It's just unbelievable. He will fist pump and down 5-love. To me, the craziest comeback that I've ever seen from Nadal was against Korda in Indian Wells. I think it was that year when he lost to Fritz in the final. Was that 22 maybe?
Yeah, 22, I think. Yeah.
Okay, and in that tournament he played Korda, and Korda was on absolute fire, blowing him off the court. And I don't remember the exact score, but the fact that Nadal turned that one around, that to me was unbelievable. I remember I actually made a video right after that match, because I could not believe seeing that, because again, like, maybe most players in tennis history would have just gotten rolled there because Korda was playing that good. But Nadal somehow, like, Nadal wasn't even playing great that match, but somehow he found something, and he was able to come back and win that match in 3 sets. So yeah, that part of Nadal is best in history by far. And there were some great fighters in the past, but he is the greatest fighter, greatest attitude on the court of all time.
Yeah, and I think attitude is a good word for it, because if you compare, like, I think Novak, as if you put them versus each other, I think Novak has an even stronger like fighting instinct when it comes maybe mano a mano or whatever, but he's also can have a bad attitude.
Listen, I think Novak is a good role model. And what people don't take into consideration are personality traits. And some people just have a more fiery temperament, okay? And I just listened to a great interview with Goran Ivanišević, and it was in Croatian, actually. I don't know if it's subtitled or not, but it's on YouTube. And it was a phenomenal interview. And it's just Djokovic's character and on the court. It's his personality that you can't change. It's just how he is. Now, what he does better than anybody in the history of tennis is the following: he will explode, he will get mad, but he turns it around, and he's able to leave those negative emotions behind him and play his best tennis almost immediately after. Where with a lot of players, and this is where I'm going to agree with you, where if you maybe copy that behavior on a court and you start, screaming and you're throwing your rackets and you're misbehaving, that type of mental state lingers with you and it carries on into points, games, and you ultimately lose matches because of that. That is absolutely not the case for Novak. So while that is his behavior on a court is not one that you should emulate unless you're like Novak, and not many people are like Novak, where let's say you have a fiery personality and you get angry, are you able to call off your absolute best tennis immediately on the next point. Remember, Djokovic is the greatest rebreaker in the history of tennis. When he gets broken, he breaks back immediately more often than anybody in the history of tennis. So most people are not capable of doing that, because that's another one of those in the category of easier said than done. And just try to picture yourself going mental on the court and maybe breaking a racket. The rage that you have, or maybe you're screaming on the top of your lungs. Are you really able to go on the next point and play your best tennis? Most people are not. So it gets a little bit complex when we're trying to understand Novak. But I do stand behind what I said earlier, that I do regard Novak as the greatest mental game in the history of tennis, because the two players with the greatest mental game are Nadal and Djokovic. But if I compare those two against each other, I feel like Djokovic has a small edge for that specific thing, which is being able to bounce back from negative things that are happening in a match. For example, losing a tough set that you should have won, or getting your serve broken, stuff like that. I feel like that he's better than anybody in the history of tennis, and those moments in a match are the ones that determine the winner very often, when the level is so equal. So it's complex. I think you were 100% right, Jonas, that generally speaking, a good behavior is gonna, first of all, there are unwritten laws of tennis etiquette that I do believe in, and you should behave out there on the court. That's number one. But number two, that if you are behaving poorly, that for most players, those negative emotions are going to linger and they're going to carry on, and ultimately it's not going to be to your advantage. So for that reason, I do agree with you that Nadal is a great role model when it comes to attitude on the court, for sure.
Yeah, no, I do 100% agree with what you say as well, because I think the way you get almost like jealous of Novak's superhuman skill of taking any kind of, and he's also amazing at taking audience interactions that are negative, which Rafa and Roger have been very lucky not to have so many.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been very unlucky in that sense, that he's had quite a few where the audience is booing, and he takes that and he makes it into fuel, which is very rare as a sports person in general. Like that's a superhuman quality, that you can take all the adversity thrown against you and use it as fuel, which is why he's so kind of superhuman as a tennis player. I think is part of that, because that's just an amazing ability. And if you can learn from that, then it's also obviously an amazing role model, and he is. But that's a thing that's so difficult to do. What Rafa does with every point being a new fresh start, and what Novak does with, okay, you throw adversity against me, I will take this and I will use it. So these guys are GOATs for a reason, right? So it's just amazing athletes, and the way they handle themselves, and you see the difference in tennis, which makes tennis so fascinating, is that Novak is one type of person, Nadal is one type of person, Roger is one type of person, and they all have handled this in amazing ways to get like 20 plus slams, right? So that's just a fascinating part of tennis. And I kind of like the hothead to watch. Like I like watching like Mute and these guys, especially if they're not as good as these three guys, I prefer that they're like, I'm more fascinated to watch like a guy who's going through all the hell of being on a tennis court and trying to find something, trying to find that spark. It's just something I really like to watch.
When Rublev did his screaming at the lines judge in Dubai and he got disqualified, I made a video and I was getting a lot of heat in this video. People were disagreeing with me because I said that was the most unfairest disqualification of all time. And I made the point that if they were going to implement those rules, that screaming at an umpire that requires an automatic default, players like Nastase, Connors, McEnroe wouldn't be able to finish one single match. And then people in the comments were saying, when Nick, grow up, we're not like in the 80s anymore. It's 2024. Players need to learn to behave. But I do feel like players deserve to have the right to complain. What if they are wronged in a way where they could get hurt on the court. Let's say that an umpire makes them play on a wet hard court or on a wet clay court. Less likely to happen on hard court. They usually stop when it rains. But let's say it's raining a little bit and the umpire wants them to continue to play on a wet court or something else where their health is in danger. Shouldn't the player have the right to voice their frustrations to the umpires when they are wronged, when they feel like they've been stolen from, which happens so many times this year with bad umpire decisions and so on? So we have to look through the player's eyes. And of course, you need to behave out there, and there are, code violations, so to speak, and you pay penalties and so on. But players need to be allowed to voice their frustrations. And what you said, when there's like drama on the court, of course, that's entertaining to watch. One of my favorite players, John McEnroe. I loved watching his matches. And even the people that hated McEnroe loved watching his matches because there was drama there. And especially when he played Borg and it was the contrast in personalities, that's super entertaining to watch. And I do think that, for that reason, the ATP has, the code of conduct, so to speak, in effect, that does allow a little bit of leeway. But the outrage after the Rublev incidents was such where people really believe that he was rightfully disqualified and you can't get into an umpire's face. And I disagree with that. Of course, he was in too close of a proximity, no doubt about it. But players, and he should have gotten penalized and, he should have gotten fined, but not right away disqualified, because I didn't see that as a threatening gesture. But in any case, I do feel like players need to be allowed to voice their frustrations when they feel like they've been wronged. And sometimes the players are going to be in the wrong too, and they're going to think they were wrong, that they really weren't. But it all makes it into a spectacle, into a more fun viewing experience, in my opinion. So if you make it too strict where players are not allowed to throw their rackets, or if they yell at the umpire from too close of a proximity, that's an automatic default. That's what people wanted in the comments when that whole thing was going on with Rublev. You're gonna have a game that's extremely boring, in my opinion. And if you watched Rublev's performances after that Dubai tournament, he was playing horrible because he was holding everything inside, and he wasn't able to, let out his frustrations, and he kept losing. Finally, he's putting together a good tournament in Madrid. So it's just in some players' personalities to be a little bit more fiery out there. We talked about Novak being like that. Some players are just like that, and they're always going to be like that. And as long as they're not putting anybody in harm's way, that's, in my opinion, deserves an automatic default, even if it was not on purpose, like Novak at the US Open. When you put somebody's health in risk as a player, you got to get out of there, and get a hefty fine, maybe a suspension, automatic default. But if you're just getting angry out there, I think it's okay. And I think it makes it for more entertaining viewing experience, for sure.
Yeah, I'm a player-centric kind of a lot in this. I usually, because we all know how frustrating. I mean, I haven't played on ATP, but when you play even like a sanctioned tournament of any kind, like how frustrated you can be and how letting out emotions can be beneficial in this sense. Obviously, you shouldn't hurt anyone, but without hurting anyone. And it's tennis is a frustrating sport where you play alone and you have no one to talk to most often, so you can't really go to your coach. And players need different outlets, and some people scream at their box. That's very common. Some people scream at the umpire. That's pretty common, but they need the energy out, right? Some people can be iceman like Borg was in his later years and Federer was for most of his career.
Yep.
But that's also very personality-wise. Like, does this work for them? Not everybody can be iceman. It's impossible, right? They need to show.
That's a great point.
And get it out.
And that's one thing about Federer that's amazing that he was able to switch from someone who was a hothead. And even if you watch his junior Wimbledon final, it's on YouTube. It's really a fun one to watch. He had like a very negative body language out there. And then I've heard stories that he would like helicopter rackets into the back fence indoors, put holes into the fences and indoor courts, throw his rackets and stuff like that. And so that seems to be his personality, right? But he was able to switch it and become the Iceman. And see, what happens with a lot of players is that if they are like that naturally, if they have a fiery personality naturally, if they completely block that, then often what happens is what happened to Rublev, that they don't play their best. They don't play with the 100% intensity and energy that they normally play with. Something's missing. Very similar when people were complaining about Monica Seles grunting, and then she started playing some tournaments and didn't grunt, and she played horrible. So some players need whatever comes out of them naturally. They need that to play at their best. So I feel like Federer is a little bit of an outlier there, that he was able to completely block all that off and maximize his potential. But it's, again, another one of those that's in the category of easier said than done, because when you're on the court, you can't control that stuff sometimes. It just comes out of you. So if you're really consciously blocking that and keeping yourself at a kind of a lower emotional level, that can sometimes come at the cost of you not playing with a 100% intensity and energy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's what you need. Like tennis is a sport where you have to bring the energy all the time, and you are the source of the energy. You have nothing else. So you need to find that mental state where you're fired up, but you're focused. So you're not too fired up, but you're in the moment. And I think it's so easy to lose that, right? And you get distracted by a bad call, by some people in the stands, by weather, by bad bounces. And it's easy to be frustrated, because you're like, okay, you're stuck in this, like trying to moderate your energy level, which is so difficult in tennis, like to find that balance of being calm. And players can do it really well. I'm very impressed, because it's always very difficult. And it's very difficult to be Iceman or to be a bit more like Novak, where you kind of take the adversity and you use that. Both are very difficult. Like it's you have to find your way of approaching it and what works best for you.
Everyone is different. Everyone's going to have different personality traits. So I am envious of somebody who can be Iceman out there and play their best, because I feel like I'm at my worst when I'm Iceman. This is when I play my absolute worst. When I'm like engaged into the match and I'm like either positively or negatively engaged in the match, this is where I feel like I'm at my absolute best. When I'm Iceman, I feel like I'm flat emotionally and I'm not playing at my absolute best level. So again, this is a super complex topic, and it's very individual. It's not one size fits all. Everybody's going to be a little bit different in this regard. But I think, again, going back to the other topic, I feel like players should be allowed, and they are allowed. It's not like they're not allowed. They are allowed to have their true personality on the court. And then, of course, just like back in the day with McEnroe, some people are going to hate McEnroe, some people are going to love him, just like some people hate Novak. Some people love him, some people hate Kyrgios, Bublik, or Murtet, and some people love them. So, yeah, that's what makes tennis so interesting, because we get to see different playing styles, but not only that, also different personalities, facing each other.
Yeah, and I think we have to embrace it as much as possible. Like I'm a Bublik fan as well. Like, I really like watching him, even though sometimes it looks like he's tanking or he looks like he's not putting in the effort, but it seems to work for him. Now he's up at his career best. He's playing really well.
He is.
And I also like his post-match interviews, which are usually very funny and sarcastic. Yes. But the thing is, like, he has found that works for him. Maybe he can tweak that always. Like he still wants to win. Obviously, he's a very good player. Kyrgios also wants to win. Maybe he wants to win too much. So I prefer that over people who are maybe. I do like Struff because he has a good game, like big game power. Berrettini from Germany, right? In a way, like forehand serve. goes to the net. Backhand not so good, maybe comparatively, but it's not so much emotion and personality to watch, right? Like that's not there. He's a tennis player, but I prefer the guys who are like, okay, I'm all out on the court. It's more fun for me to watch it at least.
Look, it's people are going to like different players for different reasons, and it's interesting to me to hear that there are so many fans of different players, and especially on the WTA, where there are so many good players that have chances to do well at tournaments. And I don't know if you're familiar with the YouTube channel Sabina Lisicki Fans. You ever seen this channel? No. It's kind of a...
I think I've seen a video from there. I recognize that, but they do different types of content.
Yeah, it's kind of a smaller channel, but they have some videos with a lot of views, and actually some players are aware of this channel and watch it. For example, Sakari knows about it because they made some kind of negative videos about her. But anyway, in the comment section of those videos, you'll see that there's so many fans of so many kind of weird, obscure players on WTA that maybe some people don't even know. So, you know, people are going to like different players. And even with Bublik, there are going to be people out there who are not going to like what he does at all. And there are going to be people that love it. They're going to think that he's the greatest. Personally, I love Bublik's game. I think he's a great player. He's got a great serve, one of the best serves in the world. He's got great potential. The one thing I don't like is some of the disrespectful shots at certain score lines. So I've made many videos about this, and some people disagree with me. Most people agree with me. The fact that the underarm serve is one of the most useless shots in tennis. Just like the between the legs, the tweener, you know, when you run down a lob, or between the legs, some that Kyrgios started doing, between the legs ground stroke. These are completely useless shots. And if they are so behind these shots, they should pull them out at 6-all in the third set tiebreak. Okay? If these shots are so great, because people are deluded thinking that the underhand serve is some kind of a great strategy. It's absolutely not. Because if it was, you'll see players using it in the most important stages of matches, and they don't. What you will generally see is when a Bublik or Kyrgios do these shots is at unimportant moments of the match, whether it's, you know, between the leg ground stroke or underhand serve. And recently in Madrid, Bublik played, I'm going to say his name wrong, is it Gimeno Traver? Is it, you know what I'm talking about? The Spanish guy?
Yeah.
How do you say his name?
Is he still playing? I thought he was retired.
Was he playing there? Wait, what was his? No, not Gimeno Traver. The other guy with the two
Carballes Baena?
Carballes Baena, that's right. He was in the final of in Morocco against Berrettini. That guy.
Yep.
So Bublik was playing him, and he was up 5-1 in the third set. All right, he got the match won. All right, he proceeds to play a point where he does like a Stan Smith forehand with a continental grip like this, and then
I didn't see that.
Yeah, and then the one after, he does a between the leg shot inside out that kind of bounces weird, and Carballes Baena misses it. Carballes Baena was serving, and he, on the next serve, hit the ball directly at Bublik, like one of those serves that goes straight into the back fence. So he was pissed because that's such a disrespectful thing to do at 5-1 up. You know what I mean? That's my point. Like, do that at 5-all, 30-all. And now I'll have more respect for you. And maybe this is just how you play tennis. You're reckless and you're a showman. That's fine. But if you do it when you're down 5-1, this is disrespect because you're not letting the other guy beat you properly. And if you are up 5-1, just beat the guy the normal way. You don't have to humiliate him out there like that. And, you know, when you read the comments, people are applauding this as something great and great tactics and whatever. It's just, and they love this, but they don't understand the nuances of tennis. And again, they're not putting themselves in the player's mind. Because when you are on the other side of the net and somebody does something like that to you, an underhand serve, or what Bublik sometimes does is he'll stand right behind the service line, receiving serve. When your opponent does that to you, you're going to be pissed. And just like Carballes Baena would try to hit Bublik with the next serve, the players are going to be pissed. So ultimately, this is disrespectful to play this way, and it's a useless. All right, because if it wasn't useless, you'll see the big three. You'll see Sinner and Alcaraz pull out underhand serves in the most important stages of tournaments, and you'll see them hit ground strokes between their legs at 6-all in the third set tiebreak, and you'll never see that because it's reckless tennis. It's not going to give you the best chances of winning the point. So I am not a big fan when Bublik does stuff like that, when Kyrgios does stuff like that, and I'm also going to call out the number one content creator in the tennis niche. Do you know who that is? Do you know who has the most subscribers in the tennis niche in the world? Most followers?
TennisTV, maybe.
That's right. TennisTV. And every time there's an underhand serve, every time there's a between the legs, every time there's, for example, somebody smashing a racket to bits and pieces, they put that in the highlights. So in a way, players are encouraged because they're going to end up on TennisTV, bro, like Medvedev said. You know what I'm saying? Like, you do something like that, you got a good chance to end up on TennisTV, which is number one content creator. They have 1.5 million on YouTube. They have over 1 million on Instagram. And those posts get a lot of views, a lot of engagement. So that type of content does well. And I feel like maybe some of these players are encouraged to do stuff like that, you know, and I don't think it's good. I'm not a big fan of it. Like when I see that, I get a very negative reaction to it. And by that, I mean, it's these stupid shots, you know, underhand serves between the legs and so on.
Yeah, I agree with the point. Like, I don't mind an underhand serve or a between the leg shot if they're losing like 5-0 themselves. Like, I personally don't mind that.
But Jonas,
I do find
even that's disrespectful, though. You know, even if
you're giving up, kind of.
You're kind of giving up. It's like, oh, you know, because the thought process is, okay, you know, I'm losing 5-0 in the third, and I'm going to show that I don't care, that I'm not trying. So I'm basically saying you didn't really beat me. You only beat me because I didn't try. That's what's happening mentally. Yep. So that is disrespectful too. Not only when you're winning, but also when you're losing. To not let the guy beat you the proper way. You know?
Yep. No, I get your point. Like I think like an underhand serve, if the guy is returning like Medvedev, I would like, go for the underhand serve, like, because he's 5 meters behind the baseline, right?
Okay. I did so many videos on this. It's not a good tactic because when you do a drop shot, you're able to put underspin on the ball, number one, but also backspin potentially. You're going to use the pace of the incoming ball. So when you do an underhand serve, you can't do backspin unless you put it super high in the air. So you're going to do a little bit of side spin maybe, but most of the time it's nothing. People just kind of tap it over. So the only thing the underhand serve has going for it is the surprise factor, because it doesn't matter if Medvedev is standing in the back fence. When somebody taps a serve over, he's going to get there super fast. I've never seen somebody hit an ace with an underhand serve unless the player was just frozen back there. If the returner attempts to run it down, they're going to get there in time. They're going to take the ball pretty high. And I loved seeing Sinner against, what's the guy's name? Is it Kotov?
Yep.
Kotov did an underhand serve. Sinner ran up and slammed a backhand down the line winner return. See, that's what should happen. And that's because the underhand serve is not a good tactic, Jonas. Even when Medvedev is at the back fence, he can still get to it. Because the thing is being struck out of the guy's hand, and there's only so much you can do to the ball. So again, the only thing that's got going for it is the surprise factor where the other guy's not expecting it, and you do it maybe quickly, change the rhythm of your serve, and you go like this. Okay, you maybe get the surprise factor. Maybe once or twice you get that in the whole match, and then you don't even get that. So it's not a good tactic. And I actually did 2 videos on this, and the second video that I did, I actually, are you familiar with Tennis Abstract?
Might have seen it.
Yeah, it's a great website. It's a great website, and the guy wrote an article on underhand serves and provided data. And what I'm saying was backed up by data that, you know, the guys that do underhand serves do it at the most unimportant moments of matches and games.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's not a good tactic.
No, it's a bailout shot. Like I agree with you actually in when you think about it. Like I understand also that some players it's they're like showing that they're checked out, you know. And sometimes that tactic can work in a way. I mean, I'm not saying you need to do an underhand serve for that, but it's like you getting the other person's energy to go down, right? Like, oh, this guy is not caring, and then it's a risk. It's sometimes you're always playing with the other guy's energy, right? A little bit. But I do agree that it's not like you'll never win doing underhand serves. So a fair point.
Do you think, like, what are the chances of holding serve if you only did underhand? Let's say your shoulder hurts and you can go out there and you can only do underhand serve. How many times would you hold serve at the pro level?
I did like an experiment with this. Like I had a really bad shoulder. There was a year ago or so, maybe something like that. I guess a good player. Like he played high level junior tennis when he was younger. He's like 30, but he's a very good player. He could play like low level. I mean, futures at least, right? So, and we were just trying it. We both tried it because I couldn't serve, and like it's so hard. Like there's you don't hold serve. Like he couldn't hold serve either. You know, I just ran up and smacked it in. So
you can't.
Yeah, it's a bad tactic. Yeah,
that's my point. Okay, just everybody that thinks that underhand serve is a great tactic. How many times you take out the surprise factor? Okay, and how many times would players hold serve at the pro level doing underhand serve? The answer is 0% of the time.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Because also the return level now is so high as well, so they can smack the ball so hard with spin on even on lower balls. So it's not like even better than they did in the past. Maybe like in the 70s it would have been easier, but no, not now. Like,
but Jonas, I blame TennisTV on that because they always highlight this stuff that's dumb. You know, like an underhand serve. They put that in the highlights, and people go crazy, and it's engagement. Okay, I get it, but you would not believe how many number one people in the comments think this is some kind of fantastic tactic because these guys are standing too far back. But how many coaches also think that this is great, which is something that it's a difference from coaching back in the day where this was what I'm saying is not so out of the ordinary. Like this is, you know, well understood that underhand serves is stupid. But now even coaches think that this is a good strategy to employ every now and then. And it's just so wrong on so many different levels. Number one, it's not a good tactic. But number two, it adds also this, what we talked about, this respect thing. And, you know, kind of the opponent's going to get angry at you, you know, when you do that. They're not going to, you know, do you think like when Bublik does that stuff, what goes on in the opponent's mind? I mean, you saw Carballés Baena almost hit him in the head with a serve. These guys get pissed, you know? So my point is like, you want to additionally motivate your opponent to beat you by doing like between the leg Kyrgios style ground strokes and underhand serves. You do that, the opponent's going to get more pumped to beat you. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So for that reason, as a coach, I would never ever approve of it if I saw it from one of our players, and I would never tell anyone to utilize tactic like that.
I get your point. I think it makes sense, actually. Yeah. But I think for them, it's like sometimes a loosening up thing when not the underhand serve, but I mean like the hitting the ball between the legs. It's like they somehow use this. I'm not saying it's a good idea. Like it's just like they somehow start doing this stuff to maybe just get away from the match, and that loosens them up in a weird way. And then next 5 minutes in the match, they can turn it on again. Like this. It's like why they are getting into these kind of patterns, you know. But maybe it's just bad. But
it's not all bad. Like we have to differentiate between the things. So there are several players who are kind of showmen, let's say. Monfils certainly is one of them.
Yep.
Kyrgios, Bublik, these are showmen. They love to entertain the crowd. There's nothing wrong with it, you know. So they'll do some shots, like Monfils will do a jump forehand or a Sampras style jump overhead, even when he doesn't need to, okay? And that all that is perfectly fine. But there's something different about the underhand serve, okay? There's something different about it, and I think the more it gets used, it's probably going to get more accepted. But when you can normally slam that serve at like 125 miles an hour, and then you serve one with like 10 miles an hour, there's just something different about that. It's kind of like, you know, here, I'm going to give you a beginner ball. Let me see what you do with it kind of thing, you know? So there's different levels to it. Okay, so I don't think anybody's upset when Monfils starts doing jump forehands, Sampras overheads, or when Kyrgios does these spectacular volleys, behind the back maybe or whatever, between the legs. That's a little different, I feel like there are some nuances to it. So, of course, these showmanship type players, they need that to get themselves going. I get it, okay? But I don't think that some of the other things necessarily are going to get your opponent angry at you, number one, and are bad strategies. You know what I mean? To a certain extent, like, are they completely necessary? As a coach, would I teach somebody to do a Sampras overhead when it's not necessary, like Monfils does sometimes, or do a jump forehand when it's not necessary? Of course not, because you only are increasing the chances of missing. Okay, so while you do a spectacular shot, you do a regular overhead with the entire court open instead of a jumping one, you'll make it 9 out of 10 times, while the jumping one you'll make 6 out of 10 times. So so even that is not a good idea to do. But I get what you're saying, and I agree with you 100%. Maybe these guys need that to get themselves going, and they're truly showmen. Ultimately, though, you'll never see guys like this at the very top of the game when they do stuff like that, because ultimately you have to play tennis the right way. You have to play high percentage tennis. You can't do stuff like that. You'll never see someone like that be ranked like one in the world. I don't think so.
No, I agree with that.
You agree with that?
Yeah. I think these guys that usually, even if they're super talented, which they usually are, I mean, they're gonna, like, at max go like top 20. I mean, like Kyrgios, I don't know what his top best ranking was.
13,
but like,
I think. 13.
Yeah.
Bublik,
so
top ranking, I don't know. I think it's like, is it 18 maybe?
Bublik?
Yeah, top ranking.
Yeah, he's up there now. I think he's top 20 now, right?
Top 20, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, and Monfils, I think, he was in the top 10, right? He was like 6 maybe or something like that, 5.
But also, I think even in Monfils' case, he played he did it sometimes. It wasn't so much part of his character, I think he played quite solid tennis. He was, in my opinion, playing too defensively most of his career. Maybe he could have used his power a lot more. But he was playing a little bit different, and then sometimes pulled this out as some kind of bailout mechanic. While Bublik and Kyrgios, they look more like they are, they are willing to throw this stuff in at any point.
I agree with you 100%. Jonas, I would put Monfils way above Bublik and Kyrgios as a player, as a level, because if you remember the Monte Carlo final between Monfils and Rafa.
Yep.
Do you remember? Monfils almost beat Rafa in the final of Monte Carlo. Like, this guy's a baller, man. This guy can play.
Yeah, 100%.
This guy can play among the very best in the world. I heard 100-meter sprint. He runs a 10-20 or something like that. Like, he could be a pro track runner, track and field. He's I think a level above Kyrgios and Bublik, and I think Kyrgios and Bublik are amazing. But I feel like Monfils is a level above that. And I agree that in that final against Nadal, I remember that match. He didn't do one dumb shot, and he was not like trying to play with the crowd. He was 100% locked in mentally and was trying to win that. And
he's a great athlete. Typical.
It's
athlete.
unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Do any sport really, and do it well. So I think that's a difference maker from the other guys who are talented, but they don't have that kind of mental athlete focus maybe as much as a guy like Monfils.
Kyrgios at times, he put it together for a whole week. Like, I remember him winning the Washington tournament one year, and he played amazing. I remember he beat Medvedev. I think he beat Tsitsipas. Playing amazing the whole week. Then one year he did the same thing in Acapulco. Then he put together a lot of good matches in Wimbledon that year. So he's able to do it. It's just not the consistency is his biggest issue. And I feel like Bublik has potential to do amazing things, especially on faster surfaces, maybe even grass. He won Halle last year. Like, these guys have a lot of potential. Bublik, I don't know if Kyrgios is going to come back or not, but Bublik has a lot of potential. Like, these are amazing players, high caliber players. And in my opinion, that other stuff is completely unnecessary. It's completely unnecessary. Like, the biggest entertainment that they can give to their fans is taking titles and not doing like stupid underhand serves and stuff, because that's temporary. That's like fun for one point and crowd goes crazy, but give your fans a title and they'll remember that for the rest of their life. For the rest of their life, give them a big title. So I feel like it actually goes against their best interest. But then going back to what you said, maybe they need that. So that's where it gets a little bit tricky. Maybe they need to play like that to get themselves going. Who knows? I don't know.
You mentioned something interesting there that lingered in my head. It's like this tennis TV culture, right? And we've talked about it before. Like we are not fans, either of us, of highlights, right? And the highlight,
yeah.
what I'm thinking is it's so deep in the culture now. Like on TikTok, for example, they have an algorithm which works like a casino. Like you can, this video, let's see this video from this completely unknown person, and we see this video, and we give them like 100,000 views, and then we take this video, it's like a roulette, it feels like, almost, and they build that into the system to make people more engaged in publishing stuff, so that more stuff gets published, and everybody can get their slice of fame, which is very smart as a business metric, right? But then that also, now we get kind of deep, but it's like it sends the wrong values in society. That's like, if I can just be lucky and get a one-hit wonder on social media, whatever, that's not a career. That's not a thing to work on. That's not like a passion, If this one-hit wonder mentality of like, okay, I'm a meme, or I'm a famous influencer for one reel, or for one character, like that's to me a little bit sad that that's like promoted so much. And I think it's reflected also in the highlight mentality on like TennisTV or whatever you want to call it.
I agree with you 100%. Why is there a rise of the underhand serve where now you see a lot of players using it here and there? Yeah. I think it's because it's on social media. It makes it on TennisTV, right? And the same goes for a lot of different things. So people get upset when players are throwing rackets or smashing rackets, but when somebody does that, what happens? Like there's a highlight of it, and they show it.
Yep.
And our kids see it. So it's not good, okay? Because when people see, maybe this is even subconscious, who knows? But when people see that you can get attention by doing certain things, people are going to try to get attention. Maybe they're not doing it consciously, because tennis, listen, you gotta have your head screwed on correctly if you want to play tennis at that level. It's not like you can't, I'll say that. So, but there's got to be a reason for the rise in the underhand serve. And I think the reason is social media, because in the 90s, do you remember, apart from Michael Chang doing it one time in his career at the French Open against Lendl in the 4th round, in the 5th set, because he was cramping, did it only one time his whole career. That gained so much attention, that underhand serve, and you don't really recall anybody else doing it for a good, like, probably 20 years after that, or 15 years. But now it's you see it a lot more. So I think you're absolutely right, Jonas. There's definitely a connection there. It's just the world we live in. You know what I mean? It's hard.
Yep. Yeah, it is a highlight world, and it's very focused on one moment, which is which I think is sad.
Absolutely.
Because it's never one moment, It's a lot of millions of moments that builds up to something.
Right.
You had one point on your latest Monday morning rant, which was interesting. That about, and I've been ranting about this before, I think, is the viewability of tennis, right? So now we're in the clay court season. The sun is often out, not always. It's especially visible that the sun is out in Caixa Magica, where, half the court is sometimes draped on the center in shade, which looks horrible, and it's impossible to watch for me. I can't watch that. But you can also lose the ball. You talked about losing the ball when the brightness of the clay and the sun versus the yellow balls we use, right?
Yeah.
And it makes for a bad TV viewing experience, and partly related to the camera angle, which is like sometimes ridiculously high up.
Yeah.
Which I always struggle with. Like, I think they should offer a lot more angles and switch in between them, or even TennisTV should have like, do you want to watch this match from angle 1, 2, 3 or camera 1, 2, 3? And the customer of TennisTV can change cameras. Yeah, that would be a much better viewing experience. Maybe this is a future thing, but I think it's very important for a good tennis viewing experience, the angle of the court, in my opinion.
It's funny you bring this up, because I just made a video about this topic, and someone left a great comment underneath my video, and they said that the technology really hasn't changed since the 80s. We watch tennis the exact same way. But you know what has changed? It's like, of course, the cameras have gotten a lot better. So the slow motion footage, after the point, that's gotten better. Maybe some of the graphics that are used to show where they're serving or how much spin and so on, all that has improved tremendously. But the actual viewing of the tennis, what people care about the most, that has stayed the same since the 80s. Okay, so in 2024, you gotta have more options, especially if you're watching it on your tablet, your phone, or on Apple TV. That's how people consume media these days. More and more people are watching less and less TV. So if it's in the format of an app and not the actual TV station on your cable provider, how easy would it be to have like some options? For example, a button to turn the commentary off. That's something else that I suggested in one of my Monday morning rants, because I prefer to watch tennis without commentary. And now on Tennis Channel Plus, which I love, by the way, you do have the option sometimes to watch without commentary. So, for example, Nadal's last match in Madrid, I watched completely without commentary, and I was just soaking in the crowd, and it was just amazing. It's a completely different experience. So that's number one. But also, why not have buttons where you can choose the player that you want to watch? So let's say that you have Nadal against Djokovic. So you could have a button. I want to watch Nadal from behind, or I want to watch Djokovic from behind. Have that option. Camera height. You want eye view, or you want it from higher above. Have the option. Because, like I said in my video, some people might prefer a higher angle of the camera because you can see the other person better. Okay, that's true. Personally, I like the eye level view. While you can't really see the person on the other side, I can see the player that's right in front of the camera so well. I can see the power, I can see the spin, I can see the underspin, I can see the movement. It's such a more realistic experience for me. But maybe some other people don't like that. So give us the options. It's 2024. This should be actually really easy to do, but we're still living in the 80s. And the things that are being improved are things that people don't really care about. The graphics, like, who cares? You know what I mean? Like, you can tell me that. You don't have to, you really have to show me. Like, tell me Nadal served like 85% to the backhand. Like, improve the actual viewing experience of the rallies. And the visibility on clay is an absolute disaster. In Monte Carlo, bright sunlight, high camera angle made it almost impossible to track the ball. And I was losing the ball in every other rally. I couldn't see anything. And even in Madrid, some of the matches, it's just too difficult to see the ball. And it makes watching tennis a lot less fun.
Yeah, and I think it's so easily solved, and there's so many solutions now with cheap cameras. And it's not like the ATP is making money. I saw some graph comparing ATP versus WTA. WTA is struggling. This is 2022. ATP is making huge profits. WTA is struggling, making losses, at least in 2 years ago or a year ago. So they can afford having more cameras, right? The tournaments can have a bunch of cameras and make the option for we have feed 1, feed 2, feed 3. It's a big match. Yeah, I want to watch Rafa up close. And when I go to a tournament live, what I look forward to is being as close as possible to one of the players, like on one side, whatever. I don't need to have I hate sitting high up on the stands. Then I can rather be at home, right? I don't want to be there. I want to be close to the play. I want to watch them move. I want to watch them hit the ball and the technical stuff. I learn a lot from that, but I also enjoy it, right? Like I'm seeing the explosiveness in their strokes and everything. And that's the beauty for me, right? So I think that they're doing us a huge disservice in selling this product that has not been updated, as you said, for like 20 years. It's the same viewing experience. You can go to archive matches on TennisTV and the same, it's like a little bit worse resolution, but it's the same.
The resolution
experience.
Is bad, but it's basically the same thing.
Exactly. And we should be further along.
Yeah. It's the same format. You show the player walking around, getting ready to serve, blah, blah, blah. And I hate this, by the way, because I do technical analysis where I often record the screen. and it will show the player, and they'll start their service motions, and they're about to like throw the ball up, and that's when they switch to that long view. So I never ever get the serve in its entirety when it's on TV in a match. But it's the same. They did this in the 80s. They did the same format. They would show the player and walking around, whatever, and then they have this horrible view. It's like this, poof. It's like you're sitting in the nosebleeds. And then, it's the slow motion after the points. And they really haven't thought about making any adjustments because I guess not a lot of people have complained. But I'm telling you, you go to my Monday morning rant, it didn't get a lot of views, that one. I don't even think it hit 10K. It got like maybe 7,000 views, but there's over 100 comments. I think like 120 comments. People complaining and saying they can't see the ball on TV. Okay, so that's like a huge problem. And the fix is easy. I'm going to shout out some of our colleagues that do a great job and have a huge fan base. My Tennis HQ, people love watching Karue play. He puts the camera right in the back fence. Okay, there's no special production. I don't know if he uses an iPhone or a GoPro. I know Winston uses a GoPro. Okay, no $10,000 camera, just a GoPro in the back fence. His videos do really well. People love watching Vincent's videos of matches. And then you have so many other ones. I'm trying to think now. I don't know. Oh, yeah, of course, Felix and his brothers. I don't know what camera he uses, but it's a very simple setup, and really doesn't cost anything. The production cost is zero. I mean, of course, you can start spending money and get multiple cameras and get expensive cameras for slow-mo and so on, but my feeling is people really don't care about that. They just want to watch tennis. And how do I know that? Because people love watching Winston's channel. People love watching my Tennis HQ. I have put matches on my channel that I have so many matches with over 100,000 views. So people love watching YouTube matches, and the production cost is like nothing. There's camera and literally camera in the back fence or right in front of the fence, and that's it. And people love it. So it's as simple as we just want to see the freaking ball, okay? We don't want that whatever is going on in Monte Carlo or even Madrid. That's ridiculous, ridiculous. Yeah. Like losing the ball in the rally. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and it's a shame because I like we talked about before here about the Challengers movie. We don't need to go into that one, but but like it's attention to tennis. Whether it's Breakpoint now, Carlitos is getting his own Netflix show. That's great. So everything that we love tennis, we want people to play tennis. We want to spread the word about this great sport, right? And when you see the sport being heard on the most basic way, right? It's the most basic way. Like the biggest channel, biggest tour, the biggest TV rights, whatever. They just provide this product, and I'm like, why? Like it's so easy. It's enough to fix, and it could be so much better with more angles and more action. Like if you see American TV production of like NFL, NHL, NBA, right? Big sports, they can put in whatever angle. Like they have amazing angles. They can play around with it. Like why not tennis? Technology is there. It's not like it's expensive either. So I don't get it. I think
it makes no sense. Shame, but it's as simple as the angle of the camera. That's what we have a problem with. Like all the stuff that's happening in between the points, it's gotten better. I don't know if you saw in Indian Wells, there was a bee infestation on one of the cameras.
Yeah.
And if you saw that camera, that looked like I don't know how much money that camera cost, but it's probably like in the tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's like an unbelievable camera, and it can go across the court, up high. But that's not to record the actual game. That's to record the in-between, the points and all that stuff that nobody cares about. Like it's as simple as the camera angle during the rallies, because we want to see the rallies. That's what people care about the most. And still, like we said, it's like it was in the 80s. And there's got to be more options. There's got to be. Like I hope maybe we'll keep talking about this, and one of these videos goes viral, that somebody starts paying attention to this, because we're not alone, man. There's a lot of people who agree with us about this, and there needs to be a change for sure.
Yeah, and I think that the ATP is trying. Like I'm on the website now, follow all the action on Challenger TV. So they have Challenger TV, which is streaming Challenger Tour, which is a great level of competition. You find your player for your country or your favorite player, they play on the Challenger. Now they have a Challenger in Sardinia where they have, I think, 15 top 100 players, something like that.
Yes.
Something completely insane, right? So especially now that the Masters are longer, players need to find action somewhere, and there's no ATP, so they have to go to a Challenger. So this is partly the reasoning. But they push that, but they need to do more with the actual product they have as well. Like, so they need to do better, I think. Sorry, ATP, but you need to do better. You have a great product in terms of sport, but you need to do better with pushing it and selling the right thing, not selling the highlights, just selling the actual and making it better so that people want to watch it. I think it would be the...
Can I tell you something?
Yeah.
It's so funny you bring this up because I think you sent me the link, actually. It was you that sent me the link. There was a Challenger where Berrettini played. I think it was in Phoenix.
Yeah.
It was the second week of Indian Wells. And it was an ATP live stream. And Gil Gross was commentating.
Yeah, on YouTube.
This?
Yeah, I sent you that. Yeah.
Man, what a great experience. Are you kidding me? You got a live chat. How cool is that? You can drop in comments as you're watching tennis. Like, that's called living in 2024.
Yeah.
We're still living in 1980 when it comes to watching tennis on TV. Okay? That's the future. I'm sorry to say this to a lot of these listen, I'm not a youngster by any means, but some of our audience is even older than I am, and I hate to say it to you guys, but that TV is like, that's ancient history. Like, that's the future. It's live streaming. People want to be in the chat of a live stream. That's the future. And I don't understand why ATP doesn't do this for the big tournaments. They should. They would get unbelievable numbers. They would do numbers. Your head would spin how many people would be tuning in, because that was a phenomenal experience. That ATP Challenger on YouTube with Gil Gross in the commentary, doing a great job. People, dropping comments in live chat. That's the future right there. And I'm glad you brought that up.
No, I think it's important to say, because that viewing experience, even though it's a Challenger, which is still fantastic tennis, you have Berrettini playing, for example, like you just that like raw feeling, and it's nice that they provided commentary as well, and it, like you said, being able to turn that off is something I like as well. Sometimes you have a very annoying... Jill is a great one, but there's some very annoying commentators and that you disagree with, and they don't know anything. Sorry, you get frustrated, right? So it would be nicer to shut it off, or because I know people are streaming sometimes on some channels, like live commentary on matches. You could then turn on the audio feed from your favorite YouTuber or whatever, and they comment on the match instead of the one. So there's so much to be done, but I feel like the focus is maybe in the PIF situation or all the, I don't know where the focus is, but it's the money,
Look,
money, I guess.
I don't know if you're familiar with, is it Cam Williams? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, that's the guy I
Australian guy, I think. Yeah. The numbers that he does on his live streams is insane.
Yeah.
I heard he gets 20K sometimes. That's unbelievable numbers. That's incredible numbers. 20,000 people in a live stream listening to him talking about a tennis match, not even watching it, because he obviously can't show the match.
No.
So he's just talking about it. And 20,000 people tuning in. So why the ATP or the WTA is not paying attention to this? Because the future, I'm sorry to say it, it's not TV. The future is social media. Okay? TV is dying. And the fact that they're not paying attention to this is it just boggles the mind, because I think there's so much untapped potential there.
Yep, 100% agree. Yeah, and it's like, I mean, everybody's streaming. My parents are 67, right? They're not watching TV. There's some streaming networks of some kind, or YouTube,
That's right.
Yeah, so it's not like an age thing either. It's like this is here already since a long time. It's just you need to capitalize and use the tools that are existing.
It's true.
Well, we have to get into the racket thing, and I was going to ask you, maybe you can't talk about it, but your white rackets, like how's it going with your rackets? Have you found a new racket, or you're staying with your rackets? What's happening?
Jonas, I think I'm ready to do the white racket reveal, and I actually recorded a video, and I put it on my website on intuitivetennis.com. This video was supposed to come out a couple of weeks ago, but I kind of postponed it because I wasn't ready. But yeah, I'm gonna reveal what the white racket is, and what will happen next with my racket situation. And you're going to be involved in this somehow, one way or another. We'll see, but let's just wait until that video comes out. I don't know when it comes out. I think it's soon, maybe next week or the week after. I'm going to do a wide racket reveal video. It's going to be great.
Yeah, it's good. I'm gonna watch it. Yeah, I'm happily to be involved in anything with the rackets, as you know, right? But
Sure.
But yeah, we'll see the big news about your gear. Are you testing any gear or strings or anything? You're just playing with what you have, right?
You know what? Like, I always am curious about strings. I always test strings, but I'm very peculiar with strings because I'm on the hunt for strings from the 90s, for polyester strings from the 90s. You know
Proper
that
poly, not the co-polys, right? Yeah.
You know, like the poly that makes that ping sound, like ping,
Yeah.
ping, ping.
Yeah.
You remember this?
Yeah.
That this poly was so lively, so like powerful that nobody on the tour used it. Like everybody used natural gut, and if they used it, they probably put it half and half. And that's the string that I like, interestingly, because see, when it comes to equipment, I'm my worst enemy because I use equipment that makes my technique worse. Let me explain it this way. What I love is to just be able to bunt the ball and not do anything, and I want the ball to go off my racket fast.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I've seen you play.
Let's say like I don't know if you can detect this from, maybe you could if you saw some of the mistakes I do.
You're quite energy efficient, like from what I can see. Like you're very energy efficient, right? So you can put a lot of pace on the ball with quite short. I mean, you're doing all the technical stuff properly, of course, but I mean, like your swings look like you are ready to maximize input, right? That's what I can tell from watching you, at least.
Listen, it's ugly. Whatever is happening now on the court is so ugly because you know, my level dropped significantly when I decided to teach tennis for a living because my level was quite good. Right when I finished college, I was playing second Bundesliga.
Yeah, which is very good.
And I was playing like position 4, 5, and 6, and I had a positive record, you know. And I played many years prior to that in like Regionalliga, always high in Germany and always winning a lot of matches. And I did well in college, like I won 90% of my matches at position number 1, and had some good results. So my level there was good. And then I decided to start teaching. That's a whole topic in itself. I mean, it's super interesting actually for people that are, you know, stuck in this decision whether they should pursue maybe a professional career or not. I think it can be very useful if I share exactly what happened in those moments. I did share some of the things to some extent, but it goes a lot deeper than that, way deeper. But in any case, I started teaching tennis. This was I was 24 because I went to college a little bit late because I played only tennis for a year before going to college. So once I started teaching, right away, I felt my level dropping big time. Because when you teach, your number one objective is that the other person gets the ball back. And when you play tennis, the number one objective is that the other person doesn't get the ball back. All right?
Yeah,
so that means technically it's like there's a lot of steering and pushing and all that stuff. So when you then switch to playing hard, not that you can't do it, but you'll make more mistakes. So and I was doing a lot of hours. That first job that I had in Rockford, Illinois, I was doing like 24 hours on the weekend. Like Saturday, Sunday, I did 12 hours each day. Like I was like Rick Macy Jr. back in those days. And so this had a horrible impact on my tennis game. And I felt like also my technique started to change a little bit from the teaching. And then I moved to Hawaii, and then I started actually playing again because my boss back then, Tim DeTonato, had like some professional tournaments. He had a challenger, Waikoloa, $100,000 challenger, and he also had a futures there. And there was a wild card tournament at the Waikoloa Hilton location, and I entered the wild card tournament just for the heck of it, you know, because I was teaching tennis over there in Hawaii. And I won the wildcard tournament, and I got a wildcard for the main draw of the futures. And then when I did that, the passion came right back, right? So that's when I started playing again. And I then moved to Florida, and I played a lot, actually. I played a lot. And my level was still dropped from when I was in my early 20s, just because I was teaching so much, you know? But because I played a lot of matches and a lot of tournaments, I felt like physically I was still doing okay. Not the same, of course, but I was okay. But then, I was maybe, I was maybe 36 or 37. I played the men's Open Nationals in Fort Lauderdale at the Jimmy Everett Tennis Center. And I played in the first round against some guy from, I remember I'll never forget this. This was a guy from Gulf Coast University, I think. And it was in the first round. And I won the first set. And the second set, I did something to my knee on one open stance backhand. And my knee has always been a problem because when I was 16, I don't know if you didn't watch the movie Challengers, but Zendaya in the movie Challengers blows out her knee and is like on the court crying, and like she's on the ground in agonizing pain. That's what happened to me when I was 16, actually. I was unconscious for a few seconds. I really messed my knee up indoors. I spun around my leg. My foot got stuck on carpet, and it was a tiebreak, first set tiebreak, up 4-2. And this was in the Frankfurt area. I remember this so vividly. And I was going to hit a passing shot, and my foot got stuck, and I spun my entire body around my knee. And I fell to the ground, and people jump on the court and carry me off the court. I had to go to the hospital. So ever since then, my knee hasn't been 100%. But it was like playable. I could play on it. But then at this match that I'm talking about, when I was 36 years old or so in Florida, playing against this guy, I did something to an open stance backhand. And I went to pick up a ball on the next point, and my knee kind of buckled and collapsed. And I was like, wow, something's broke in there. Something's broken. And then I took injury time out. I taped up my knee. I somehow ended up winning this match. I stupidly went out the next day and played again on half a leg, and ended up winning just because I knew that I could beat that other guy, even without being 100% fit. But then after that match in the second round, I couldn't walk and I had to pull out. And that's really the last time I played like high level tennis, like that. Like, because after that, I stopped playing tournaments because I was scared that I was completely going to blow out my knee and not be able to teach and stuff like that. And so what ended up happening then was that I needed to get as much help from the equipment as possible, from the rackets, because I couldn't move that good. So I was looking for ultimate power. What is the most powerful racket that I can possibly find? And that's when I started looking. Because I always liked the feeling of not doing that much to my strokes and making them go fast. Like when I hit a half volley or when I pick up a ball from the baseline, and I like the feeling of the ball just kind of shooting off the racket without me doing much. But that got even worse because now when I try to play, I, number one, can't move properly, because that's what you see me playing on YouTube, those matches, that's me like without any matches and without any practice. Like this is like so bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's why when you say you saw me play, like this is, compared to what it was before, it's so bad because I can't really move. So the equipment has to be like super powerful so that I can keep the points as short as possible. But this is coming at a detriment to my technique because I'm using equipment that's so powerful. I don't really have to do that much with my strokes. And it's, in a way, making my strokes worse and worse. Because I did a series of videos in 2022, what's wrong with my strokes. And this was a great video series because you can try this out if you want. Because you're going to get a lot of comments. You just title it, "What's Wrong with My Serve?" and let's see what happens. But I did this, and there was, of course, hundreds upon hundreds of comments, people telling me what's wrong with my strokes, because people love that.
Everybody wants to tell people what's wrong with their strokes.
Jonas, try this out. It's a fun video experience.
I know what's going to happen. Like that.
It's gonna be an avalanche of comments.
Yeah. People
So
love it.
anyway,
Like, oh,
yeah,
unsolicited. This is also solicited advice. You're actually asking them. Like,
this
they
is
will give you
solicited.
advice anyway,
Listen,
right?
this is okay because I'm asking what's wrong with
Yeah,
my strokes. But
yeah.
unsolicited advice is like the worst. Let's talk about that later. I do have
Mm.
want to say something about that. But anyway, when we're talking about my forehand, for example, and that what's wrong with my forehand video, I said that I have a really poor finish on my forehand. Often, if you see my forehand, I don't finish it all the way. I mean, it looks ugly anyway because I have a super high loop. The racket head goes over my head and it kind of goes kind of further back behind my body. And then it's a bent arm forehand where the elbow is very bent. But then I also don't really finish it. Like it's almost like an Ivan Lendl forehand from way back in the day when he played with the Adidas racket.
Mm-hmm.
Only worse. So that's a problem that's due to the equipment. So in other words, I feel like if I had a racket that's less powerful and didn't give me so much for free, I feel like I would be forced to finish more and it would improve my technique. But I just, the complexity of the whole situation, you know, I explained to you what happened to my game and the fact that I can't move and I need the power and I like having this free power. And the only way I can really play points is if I'm super aggressive because I can't really run. It's super complex, but looking at the technique, taking some of that power away out of the equipment, maybe playing with strings that are less lively, playing with a racket that's probably heavier and maybe softer frame, maybe maybe more heaviness in the handle, lighter racket head, where I have to hit a full stroke like a low powered racket that's more flexible. That would help my technique more because I would be forced to finish my strokes more and I wouldn't get so much for free. I know this to be 100% true, but it's so difficult because tennis equipment and rackets can be so mental and your preferences, they're so strong and you know exactly when you like something, when you dislike something, and that dislike, it's so strong where it can make playing tennis a nightmare because I play tennis every day and I want to have a good feeling when I hit the ball and I just can't handle the feeling of not getting that power from the equipment. I just hate it. I can't stand it. I get angry. I get in a bad mood. And I know though that it's coming at a cost that I actually should be using different equipment because always I say this like in all my videos. I have a lot of racket videos coming up very soon. I say I'll always play with women's rackets because that's my preference, you know. But I definitely probably would benefit from playing with rackets that all my buddies were using when I was the only one using rackets like this. Okay, like all the guys that I grew up with, like that were high level players, they use normal rackets like what you see the guys using on tour. But I always use the weird rackets, and it's just this. It's so hard to not fall into your preferences regarding rackets and choose what's you know what's actually best for you, even though you might not like it, and then eventually maybe you get used to it. But it's a very challenging problem.
Yeah, it's a funny situation because like some players, it's so personal, right? Like power, easy power is good if you can control it, right? Easy power is obviously good. However, what you're saying is correct. It will impact your technique. So the racket impacts the technique. If you have a super powerful racket, you need to find a way to control that power. Shorten your swings, change the way you follow through, whatever it is. Like you have to control it. You have to then add super stiff strings, which is going to hurt you in the long run, probably. But then you have like Manarino. He uses a very powerful setup, and he kind of bunts a little bit as well. And he's a top 20
Exactly.
player. He
Exactly.
uses that power to his great advantage, and he's found that getting used to it. He wasn't always playing with this kind of setup, but over the years gone down, down, down. So I think there's a lot to be said for like maximizing what you get from the racket if you can control it. But some players prefer having that full swing where they can swing all in on the ball. So it's very personal, I think.
It's very personal. It's very true. And I think Manarino is an outlier there. You're absolutely
Yeah,
right.
100%. Yeah.
But if you want to look at it like simply, and feel free to disagree with me if you want, but a racket that's like heavy requires a full stroke. When racket that's possibly stiffer and lighter and has a larger racket head size and maybe has a thicker beam doesn't necessarily require a bigger stroke. You can get away with stuff that I do on the court, which is bunting the ball around. So when you take, like, for example, let's say a senior tennis player that doesn't have a good technique, that has like just hacked up strokes, okay? If you give them a racket that's too heavy, they won't be able to play, because that type of racket requires a stroke, a full stroke. It just won't give you that much for free. But they can't play with those like super oversized rackets where you're just kind of like bunting the ball around like this, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because the racket gives a lot for free. So that's just an extreme example. There's a lot in between of those two things. There's a lot in between, okay? I'm giving you like the absolute extremes, but that's basically what it is. Like, you have to be careful. You have to really understand yourself as a player, understand your technique really well, and then choose equipment that's appropriate for you to maximize your game.
I also think it's good to have some outside people, whether it's your coach or your friends or your hitting partner, giving a feedback on like what's the most troubling ball, or where do you play the best? Because sometimes you can get in the head that, oh, I'm playing really well with this racket, and then the other guy says, well, your balls are really weak, right? Like there's no power on them. Like it's easy, and then you're like, aha, everything goes in. I feel like I can go full stroke, but there's nothing on the shot, right? So there's also that feedback. That's talking more advanced players, I would say. But I think when it comes to heaviness, like I it's not maybe the weight, in my opinion. It's more this type of racket. Like if you have a stiff, big head, like pure drive, we're talking typical pure drive or bigger, then you're gonna get easy power and you can maneuver it depending on the weight. Most traditional rackets are heavy and small head size. You have the Percept 97H. You tried it on your channel, I think, if I remember correctly. And that's a super heavy racket, but it's pretty low powered because it's like small head 97 and thin beam. So the thin beam and the small head is more, I think, relevant than weight. You can take a racket like Manarino plays with a technically powerful spin racket, and he has quite a lot of weight to it as well. So he has even more power, and then the strings are low as well. So he's getting like the maximum power from this racket, like he can probably get, in a sense, without controlling it. Rafa, for example, playing 370 swing weight, but it's in a kind of a racket where if you remove the weight, you could give it to anyone, because the racket itself is not tough, but he then adds so much weight that nobody is going to control it so easily, right? And be able to play with it for 1 hour. So the weight is I would say, depends a lot on your preference, while the head of the racket and the beam shape is a bit more related to, like, okay, this is for a senior, this is for a control-oriented player, and so on. It's my take on it.
Can I butter you up, but then I'm going to cook you a little bit, okay?
You can cook it all the way you want.
Is that okay?
You can start the cooking as well. You don't need to butter anything.
I'll butter you up because, listen, if I ever have a question about rackets or strings, you're the first person I'm gonna contact. Now I have the privilege of having your number. I can reach out to you directly. But even if I type something into Google, your website is so great, and there's so many good things on there, so much good information for absolutely for free, that that stuff pops up, and it's so helpful. And your YouTube videos are very, very helpful as well. And the amount of knowledge that you have is absolutely insane. A lot of people don't realize the depth of your knowledge. Like, just one example, in one of our previous podcasts, you knew the length of one of my rackets that I used back in the early 2000s, the Wilson Hyperhammer 5.2, a racket that was only around for a couple of years before it got discontinued and replaced by the Burn, I think, or something like that. And you knew the length of that racket, which is 27.25.
Correct.
You knew this. You know how many people on the planet know this? Not many. Also, you know about twist weight. Do you know how many people know about twist weight? Not many.
That's not so common, no.
So Jonas is like an absolute master. Now, I'm going to say this. I'm not going to mention any names so people don't really notice about you, because you're kind of a humble guy, but you also work with like elite level players that we all know by name. I'm not going to name them here, but you consult like the absolute elite regarding strings, rackets, and so on. So you're the absolute GOAT. However, you do make videos where you say that heavy rackets are good, which is absolutely correct information, because fact is that when you look at professional tennis, they play with heavy rackets because those deliver the most amount of power and stability. There's absolutely no doubt about this. There's no question that this is true. However, I'm going to give you a couple of examples of something that happened recently, and I want you to give me your thoughts on it. So there was this one guy that comes down for lessons every now and then, and he has like several rackets in his bags, and it's the weirdest. It's the weirdest racket. So the racket that he's currently using is like a super heavy racket that you'll see on tour, and it's got a super small beam. It's super flexible and it's very heavy. The racket that he previously used was like a typical rec player racket, like super wide beam, super light, like I think 260 grams, super big head, so exact opposite specs. So he's playing with this heavy racket and he says he loves it. But at the same time, he has a big brace on his arm, okay? But he claims he loves it. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to, people tell me they love their racket. I do think that recreational players can pull off heavy rackets, no doubt about it. I've seen it. So when somebody tells me they like it, they like it. Okay, whatever. Then I'll give you another example. There was another guy that came to see me for lessons all the way from Germany, and he brought his girlfriend. Now, the girlfriend is a beginner, and she's a very petite woman, maybe 110 pounds, and was a beginner. And she was using a very heavy racket, very heavy, with a smaller racket head size, under 100 square inches. Something that would be way too heavy for most, like even advanced recreational players. Somewhere in the 300 and high 340s, so almost 350 grams.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yes, for a beginner, female, 110 pounds, very petite, very good athlete, but like just not someone who's normally would use a racket like that. So I asked the guy, like, how come she's playing with this racket? And he goes, well, I bought her this because I thought heavy rackets are good. Okay, they're good for the arm and they're good for the recreational player. And both of these guys watch your videos. So,
oh no,
Jonas, listen. This is the cooking part, and it's not really a cook, but what you're saying is 100% correct. And I saw your videos with Daniel, and I know Daniel personally. I worked with Daniel, and what you guys are saying is 100% correct. Like the heavy racket is the optimal racket, and I made a video about this. It's available on my website, where I made an analogy with cars. Like people have to be honest with themselves and really feel whether it's the correct weight for them, because the amount of people that are going to be able to use a heavier racket at the recreational levels is going to be the minority. The vast amount of people are going to be more benefited from a lighter racket. And I think people take what you say often out of context, and context is so important, Jonas, because do you think that guy, what I was telling you about, and by the way, that guy is like, he's like maybe a 3.0, and he's probably like 10 years older than me, and he's like of average fitness, and he's wearing a huge brace. Like a heavy racket like that, probably not the right choice. And what about the girl? What do you think? Probably not the right choice, right?
No, 100%. And I think,
go ahead.
Finish your cooking.
So my point is, like, this is not really that I'm cooking you, but people will watch a video that you did with Daniel, and I think they don't maybe watch the video in its totality. Maybe they just watch the first 4 minutes and they're like, okay, great. You know what? Heavy rackets are the best. Let me just slap on some lead. Let me put this up to like Rafa swing weight, would you say 370?
Yeah.
And then they go on the court and they don't have proper technique. Let's face it. I've been doing this since I was in my diapers, so to speak. I've been teaching tennis since I was in my diapers. I know this sounds insane, but I grew up in a tennis teacher family.
Yeah.
Okay. My dad was a tennis pro, so I grew up with this business. And people sometimes wonder, Nick, why do you make tennis equipment videos? Yeah, because my dad strung rackets by hand back then, and then he continued to string rackets, and then my mom actually strung rackets for a while. She also strung my rackets, and when we lived in Germany, there was a tournament called the Warsteiner Damen Masters, where Micah Babel played, and my mom strung Micah's rackets. Okay, Micah probably doesn't know that, so shout out to Micah Babel. My mom strung her rackets, so my mom was a stringer. Then I started stringing when I was maybe 16, 17, and I strung not only my rackets but also rackets for other people for the club. And then when I moved to the United States, I strung at each one of the clubs that I worked at. I was even the stringer at the Rockford Challenger, where I broke one of the players' rackets. It was a nightmare. The racket just snapped on the stringer, and she was actually mad, the player, but there was nothing I could do. But I also ran a couple of pro shops, and naturally, as a tennis pro, like when you give lessons, people will ask you about equipment. Are these strings too old? Are these strings good for me? Is this racket good for me? This is naturally like what happens to tennis pro. So I earned the right to talk about this. And, I see the connection between technique and equipment. And I've been able to make the following observation, that when somebody has very poor technique, and let's face it, people at the recreational level have poor technique, okay?
Yep.
The percentage of players that are at the advanced recreational level, like what you would consider yourself, you're playing like ITF tournaments, you're at the absolute top rec level, that's the minority. I would say that's like maybe 1 to 5% of players. So the vast majority of players at the rec level is not in that group, but somewhere in the middle, probably intermediate or advanced beginner level. And those players generally have technical flaws. So when it comes to equipment, let's again take an extreme example, somebody with terrible technical flaws. If they get a light racket that's also stiff, that also has a large racket head, that's also head heavy, that also has a wide beam, that racket is going to be very responsive, very powerful, and you can get away with poor technique and play tennis. For example, some of these senior players with very poor form, poor mobility, so on, they can play tennis just fine with those rackets. If you give those players a heavy rackets require a fuller swing and proper technique, okay? So that is the problem, because I gave you the two personal examples, extreme examples of players who absolutely shouldn't be playing with those heavy rackets, because that girl I was telling you about, physically, technically, she should be using something that's going to give her a little bit more for free, and same for that other guy. So therein lies the danger of talking about heavy rackets, because people are not paying attention. They just are too simplistic, and they're thinking heavy rackets good for the arm, no more tennis elbow, most power that I can get, and that's what they go with. Slapping lead tape on there, customizing it, making the swing weight insane. And that's true, though, if you are at a certain level. But the question that people have to ask themselves is, what is your status of your technique? And then make determinations based on that, or what equipment you should be using with. Now, it's possible that you're in a development stage and you don't always have to use the same racket. Like, there's, for example, beginner rackets, then intermediate, then advanced, and you don't use the same racket that you used when you were a beginner. So as your technique improves, so does your equipment, so to speak. So that's, for example, that girl I was telling you about. She should have maybe started with a beginner racket and then progressed into other rackets, rather than starting with like a freaking racket that is used on the tour as a beginner, which is going to give her problems right off the bat. So
you're completely 100% right that if you put like a video with the title heavy rackets, and like I think I put something provocative like heavy rackets are better question mark or something in the headline, people which is good for clickbaity stuff, and also the point, I think people might not even watch the video. They might watch 1 minute, 2 minutes, and it usually knocks in doors that they already believe in, right? Like, oh, I always thought like a 400 gram racket was better,
right?
And then we made like if you listen to the whole thing, you get the nuance, right? And then
of course,
we made a second video where we had like, if you want to add any weight to your racket, which I think is a good point, especially for players who are maybe traditional, is that if they have like a average intermediate racket, pure drive, arrow, whatever, that's 300 grams, nothing too heavy, nothing too demanding. Adding like a few grams in the handle is a decent way. You don't need to add anything in the head, right? Like that makes the swing weight high, will make it tougher to maneuver. So that's like, if you want to have a bit of more head-light balance, which a lot of traditional players like, they can take a modern racket and they add weight to the hand, right? So that was like a little bit the point. And you start there and then you can see. But I think, yes, you're right that many people rock up with very demanding racket and high tensions as well, which is another point leading to arm issues. I think is a lot of players that I consult on, like if, through the service, whatever, they play with like RPM blast 55 pounds, and I'm like, I play with 45 pounds, sometimes 47. It's like this. So it's a thing that needs, everything requires nuance. The internet rarely allows for nuance, and I do agree that then sends the wrong message, and I think that's a little bit of a problem in general, right?
Like what you're saying on this video is 100% accurate. I don't disagree with a single thing, and a lot of people don't realize you and I agree on rackets 99%. We have the same opinions. I'm more coming from the teaching side of things, because I do want players to, number one, play pain-free, but also play their best tennis. And I do see, a wrong racket or wrong tension, like you said, making players' lives on the court even more difficult than they already are, because it's not so easy to get better at tennis. So, that when I give advice, it's coming from the viewpoint of helping the biggest amount of players. Now, what we all often get in the comments is not the representation of the biggest group of players. It appears that these are, the players that like stuff that the pros like and stuff that requires really good technique. That's my impression of the comment sections. But just like I told you, I grew up at tennis instruction. We were stringers for many, many years, strung tens of thousands of rackets. What I have seen throughout these years is the vast amount of recreational players have problems with their technique. And when you have problems with your technique, the racket can help you play tennis more effortlessly and better. Now, sometimes as you improve, if you don't change your equipment, that can also be a problem. For example, the story I shared with my rackets, how my preference is not the most beneficial to my technique. That's where the coach has to step in and guide someone along the way, or the services that you provide are unbelievably helpful, because you're going to go through stages in your development, and the equipment will change in your development. This is super obvious in juniors. Obviously, they're going to start with one of those baby rackets, and rackets going to start getting longer and longer, and eventually they're going to play with pro level rackets. So, but at the recreational level, it gets a little bit more complicated, because a lot of people, like those two examples that I told you about, they jump into the game of tennis right off the bat with like pro level equipment, and that it's not that you can't learn tennis that way. You can, but it just makes it more challenging than it already is, because it's challenging enough to begin with.
Yeah, I think tennis has an information problem, and it's been something, I've tried. I mean, it's something I'm fascinated by in a way, but it's like, because people think, let's say people with money, like a lot of people with money play tennis, so they go like, okay, I'm gonna start this hobby. A lot of people have many hobbies they love. They change hobbies. They have 16 hobbies. They have one hobby for a year, and then next hobby. When they start playing golf, they buy the best clubs. Like, oh, I want to buy the most expensive, best clubs. And those are very difficult clubs to use, because they're for the tour players, right? And the same thing happens in tennis, because people think that, like, oh, if I buy the best iPhone, I will have the best experience. So they pay for the premium iPhone, and that has the best camera, the best processor, the best everything. But in a sport, it's not the same. You need to go by your level, right? So in your level of expertise, and you need, if the thing says tour, and this is a little bit of the problem with the racket companies. I think they throw the words pro and tour and MP people don't even know what it means. So it's like, as a consumer, you have no idea, like, what racket should I get? I guess the tour one will be very good, so I buy the tour one. But
right.
That's not the right one for them, right? So it's like the information flow in tennis is a bit weak in that sense, right? Or what racket they should use, because MP mid plus means nothing. Like, what is that? Like, that is not really like a thing you can use, you know, or like, oh, this is a shift 99. Okay. You know, so the information is pretty bad, right? What
but
you
it's
should get.
also tough to generalize and give
Of course.
generic advice, because I provide general recommendations for beginners, intermediates, and advanced players in my tennis equipment videos. But I say in those videos that you could easily be someone that where this is not going to apply at all. And I've seen so many players that are like that, that maybe need a little bit like more of a pro level racket to handle, depending on whatever. So there are some players, even though they're at a very low level, they need a little bit more of equipment that's more commonly found at the higher level. So it gets super complex, it gets super confusing, and it's important for everybody to take the information that you provide or that I provide, but then they just gotta go out there and demo rackets and really go and be honest with themselves and find the right equipment. You know, the testing is super important. Like what you think that you like is almost never going to be what you will like in reality. You gotta test it. I don't know if you know people like that, but I know so many people that buy tennis rackets without ever trying them. Do you know people?
No, yeah. I think it's sometimes it's an accessibility thing, because they tennis shops are not, are, you know, fewer and further, you know, farther in between.
True.
Kind of, they're like, it's not,
True.
now you go online. Some have demo programs. People don't have the patience. Maybe they get
Tennis
demos with,
Warehouse. Sorry,
yeah,
sorry to interrupt you, but Tennis Warehouse does have a demo program, right?
yeah, which I usually recommend people to
Yeah.
use, you know, because you cannot pick, like, if I'm a bad golfer, like I played golf like when I was younger, 16, and now I play like one round in 10 years. But when I would pick golf equipment, because I don't know nothing about golf equipment really, like I know a little bit, I would, you know, try to do a lot of research.
Yeah.
But I would never probably buy like a set of clubs, because it's an investment, right?
Right.
If I didn't try them before and say, okay, this feels good,
You
so
got
I'll go with that, you know. Yeah,
you got to try. And, you know, I am aware that there are some countries out there where you can't demo rackets at all, and it gets super complicated there. Another thing that, something that you brought up, but I've talked about this like 3 years ago in a video about tension and the problems that people are going to face when they request a lower tension, because stringers are still in 2024 of the belief that if you go there and give them a racket and tell them, I want it strung at 38 pounds or 40 pounds, I would say the vast majority of stringers in the United States are going to say, oh, are you sure it's going to be too loose? And so now my recommendations to string certain poly strings in the 30s and low 40s, and when they tell the stringer to do that, they get a completely opposite opinion. And now they're completely confused, because that might have been the case in the past. But with the modern copolyester strings, as you know, Jonas, like those not only can be strung at lower tensions, but should be strung at lower tensions. Of course, not all of them. It depends on the string, of course.
Yep.
But they're going to perform the best. Now, there's also, if you want to go into the weeds of stringing, there's a great article that I read once, and maybe I can send it to you and then you put it in the description. But this guy was talking about pull speed. Are you familiar with the term pull speed on the stringer?
Yep. Yeah.
And a lot of machines are set with pull speed that's too high.
Yep.
They're electronic machines, and so when they string a racket, let's say with like a modern copolyester string, they destroy the string on the stringer. They overstretch the string on the stringer. He compared, in this article, compared it to like if you get like a pen, and you know that stretchy thing in a pen. When you overstretch that, at some point it doesn't snap back in place, right? It'll snap back if you stretch it a little bit, but at some point you overstretch it. Now it's like, right? It's broken. That happens to strings when they're overstretched on the stringer, when they're strung too tight, when the pull speed on the stringers is set too high. So what I find with players, and I featured this in a video, I was glad I was able to capture this on camera with Shamir, where he got his rackets freshly strung, and he said, I don't remember what he said it was, but it was like, in my opinion, because I go like this, and I got a pretty good feeling for the tension. To me, it was 10 pounds higher than what it was supposed to be. So I see this a lot where even if they go to the stringer and tell them stringer to 40, somehow the racket still comes back and it feels like it's 50. You know, it's like, it's the tension is a humongous problem at the recreational level. And it's generally, the rackets are strung way too tight with modern strings, which then results in less responsiveness, and you can destroy your arm that way. So yeah, it's a huge problem.
Yeah, there are many issues on the rec level. I completely agree with everything you said, and I really push low tensions. I try to push it a lot because I think, like, if you string a racket, and I also urge people to restring more frequently because it's not that much of an expense. I mean, either you string yourself or you have to give it. Yeah,
because those strings won't pop. They won't pop anymore. Strings used to pop back in the day. Like I talk about the polyester from the 90s. That used to pop after one set.
Yep.
Now the modern strings, they, especially if they get like overstretched, they will never pop. Like I have some guys that have had strings on their rackets for like a year.
Yeah.
And they just don't break. You see a lot of times in the lower records, they can't really feel whether the string is bad or not. That's why they ask me or other coaches for advice. Like, this is bad. Do I need to restring this? They just don't break those strings. They stay on there forever. And they lose a lot of playability. So we can't make general guidelines, but you do have to restring frequently. Sometimes some strings, you know, I'll probably restring like after one match. Others, maybe you can leave it on a little bit longer, but definitely restring frequently. But strings are going to go dead.
Yeah, it's one of the most important things. And also you get a fresh, it's like changing overgrip. Like change your overgrip and change the strings. Like you have a new racket in your hand. Like it's that easy. It's like you don't need to invest in lots of new rackets. Just like tweaking the string, restringing the racket might be enough, and you have a new racket, right?
And change your socks. Change your socks.
That's pretty good, actually.
You know how good that feels? A new pair of socks in the third set?
I always bring.
That's nice.
When you play on clay as well, like they get like really dirty. Like it's so nice to be just putting in a new shirt and new socks.
Because like, the socks get wet. The socks get so soaking wet. And
it's horrible to play. Like
fresh pair of socks.
If you really want to go all in, you have two pairs of shoes, right? So you go.
Jonas, that's something I never really covered that in my videos. I don't think so. The re-gripping the racket, that is so important. You know, I'm glad you brought that up because, and this is a problem at the junior level too. See, some of the juniors, they come with grips that are so disgusting, so old. They probably played like 3-4 matches with them. They're like brown, and you lose their tackiness very fast. Now you don't have to be Richard Gasquet and do it on every single changeover, but I would definitely replace the grip every set. It's going to be expensive. You probably can get away with maybe playing a whole match with it, but I replace grips so fast. Usually when I play, I like a fresh grip every set if I'm playing with the same racket. And before I start the match, I want all my rackets in my bag to have a fresh grip on there. Super important because the feeling in your hand, and especially if you're in a battle and you're sweating and your racket is slipping a little bit, if you have an old grip, you're going to play worse. The racket's going to feel like it's slipping and you might miss a few shots here and there. So yeah, re-gripping, super important thing.
Also important for comfort, right? So if you have a old overgrip, your hand is slipping, you're gripping tighter, you might get the arm problems from that. So it's also a basic thing. You don't have also the cushioning goes, right? So you have good cushioning with an overgrip, adds the cushioning from the base grip, and with an all grip you lose that. So I think
for sure
that's an easy investment in getting your tennis a little bit like fresher. It's pretty easy.
Much so.
All right, man. I have to skedaddle. I have a dinner. We always talk so long, but it's good.
I
always enjoy it. But
I just want to make sure I was joking when I said I was going to cook you.
Yeah, I know.
That was a joke. I was trying to set it up. It wasn't funny. My jokes are never funny, but that was just joking around.
You lived in Germany for too long. Your jokes died in Germany.
They're very dry, and they died over there. It's true. All my humor died when I moved to Germany. You're right about that. All right, man. But yeah, I wasn't going to cook you, but I just wanted to tell you a couple of stories of how people, they misinterpret what they hear online, even though it's correct information. That was the whole point of the story. I don't know if it came across and then my phone died, so I just wanted to tell you that.
No, but that's I agree with everything because I get that as well, right? So I get the comments and messages and people are like, I'm using 420 gram racket. I'm like, okay. Yeah, you didn't watch the video then.
Yeah, right? I get that all the time, by the way. People will write comments on my videos by just reading the title.
Yeah.
They don't even watch. And I know by the watch time, we get the analytics. They watch like 2-3 minutes and they don't really hear what we're saying. You know what I mean? And
they just want to make themselves heard, right? That's the
absolutely thing. Now, we didn't tap into unsolicited coaching in the comment sections. Maybe we'll leave that for next time, but that's really that's a hot topic.
Yeah, let's leave that for next time. I would love to get into that as well.
Yeah,
that's a very good one. We can do these more frequent when you have time, but it depends on your weeks, right?
I'm available anytime, man. Whenever you want to hop on here and do one, I'm ready.
Great. Yeah, it's good. I think our people like the talks. They like your straightforward opinions and your knowledge, and I think that comes across also in the numbers of the podcast, but also in the feedback you get. So that's great.
I do what I can, but I'm always honored to be on here because I do think you provide a really good product. And like I said, I always call you the GOAT. You are the GOAT of tennis equipment. Never forget that, okay? You're the undisputed GOAT.
Too kind.
All right, man.
I'll do my best.
All right, take care.
Take care, my friend.
All right, bye-bye.
We'll talk soon.
Bye-bye.